Okay, so I was invited in today to basically, most of you guys know who I am. I recognize a lot of your faces. So my name is Tom King. I'm a personal trainer with Good Life Fitness, right through there. I'm at Maryvale and Hunt Club in Ottawa, so the other end of town. It took me a little bit of a drive here, but that's okay. Thanks for having me in today, obviously. Today I'm coming in to talk about the basics of resistance training. Previously I've talked to you about nutrition and injury prevention and technique for running and stuff like that last summer. So this summer it's all about resistance training. So essentially building muscle and using your muscle to help strengthen the body and ultimately burn some calories and potentially lose some weight in the long run too, which is all good things, right, for sure. Some of the benefits to resistance training, obviously, like I said, building muscle and burning calories, but it can also help alleviate or reduce the chance of injuries as well, because when you have a stronger body, your skeletal structure and the connective tissues don't have to do as much work. So that's obviously a good thing too. Now that being said, we're going with super basic, so it's kind of, I shouldn't say idiot's guide to resistance training, but at the same time it kind of is, because if we don't go over the very basics, then you could set yourself up for injury. So we're going to take things really simple and really easy today. I gave you guys all a handout, so if you want to read along, I'm going to read a little bit off of it and then build onto these points as well as we go through things. So yeah, so the first thing we want to talk about is the warm-up. So I suggest here on the handout 5 to 10 minutes of light cardiovascular exercise. So I know that you guys like to get up out of your desks and walk over to the gym. Sounds like on a regular basis. Sounds like everybody uses the weight room here, right? For sure. Yeah, awesome. But in terms of light cardiovascular activity, you could maybe even use the stairwell, go up and down it a few times. I'm saying 5 to 10 minutes. The idea is to get the heart pumping a little bit, but not overdo it. Intensity, I always put things on a scale of 1 to 10. 1 being extremely easy, maybe like a walk in the park kind of idea, and 10 being like an all-out sprint or extremely hard exercise to do. So during your warm-up, you want about a 6 to 7 out of 10. It's not too bad, but you're feeling the benefit of it, and at the end of that 10-minute time frame, you get a little bit of that perspiration atop the cross of the brow so that you're actually warmed up, ready to go. Benefits of the warm-up: decreases chance of injury because the muscles are actually warmed up, ready to go, rather than, again, that connective tissue doing the work for you. You want the muscles to be doing work as much as we can. Also primes the pump too. Literally that pump, the heart that pumps all the nutrients and oxygen and energy throughout the body, gets that guy fired up, ready to go. And when that happens, it takes all the lactic acid out of there, so all the byproduct of the actual exercise, and also allows you to work out longer for harder as well. So you get a better workout by doing a proper warm-up. I've also suggested some dynamic stretching and foam rolling in there as well. I have a couple things on YouTube that I'm going to send along this afternoon as well through the email that you guys should hopefully get forwarded through from Erica. That way you have an idea of kind of what that's all about. I've brought the foam rollers and stuff in last year when we talked about injury prevention for running. So you have an idea of what that might look like. The videos and other stuff that I'll send you this afternoon will give you even more of an idea of what that's all about. Yeah, for sure. So the first thing, or the next thing I'll talk about is securing the core. So what I'm going to actually get you guys to do is just stand up for me. All right, so we all just did one of the things we're going to talk about later. We all just squatted, we all just stood up. So we're going to talk about squats later, but the first thing we're going to do is just find your feet a little bit. So when I talk about the core, I talk about the pelvis through basically the edge of the neck or the edge of the head. So this whole area in through here. Now it's important that we talk about that because that helps with the alignment and everything else, and posture essentially. So what I want you to do is find a comfortable stance. Some people like feet hip width apart or maybe just beyond. Whatever feels kind of comfortable, and you can almost bend your knees and feel really good in that area. Okay, the next thing we're going to do is squeeze your bum, and you're going to feel that kind of tilt your pelvis a little bit as you do that. So you got your bum tight now. Okay, the next thing we're going to do is pull your belly button in. Yeah, and that's that lower abdominal area. Yeah, for sure. So yeah, we're already in pain. Perfect. So this can actually help alleviate back pain just by standing there like that. So that's one important component. But we just kind of secured that lower part of that core. The next thing we're going to do is then bring our shoulders back and kind of down a little bit. And you'll feel that kind of depress a little bit. And now if we stand there and even bring your head back a little bit, you should feel like you're kind of walking around with a stick up your butt almost, right? See, it sounds funny, but now you're going to never forget that because I said it. Yeah, exactly. So the whole idea is that whenever we exercise, whether you're squatting, you're lunging, or pressing, or pulling, or anything like that, we always want to try and have this good solid foundation. What this literally does is stack your vertebrae on top of each other so it's all nice and secure, and it uses the muscles that's actually there to hold everything in place. So I'll show you guys from that lateral profile. So if I let everything hang out, I literally start getting lazy, right? I squeeze, I pull in, and I bring everything back up. It straightens everything back out together. So now it's all stacked up. So if I put any kind of weight in my hands, it's all actually going to be resting nice and straight, right? Rather than resting like this. You can see that's a lot better. Yeah, it looks better for sure. Yeah, awesome. Does that make sense to you guys? So you kind of feel it. Okay, so everybody's gonna relax again. Yeah, you're gonna move your feet around a little bit, find that comfortable stance. Yeah, squeeze your butt, belly button comes in, shoulders up and back and down. You're gonna feel that depression, and then bring your chin back just a little bit. There you go, and you should be able to stand like that. Relatively comfortable, maybe more comfortable for others, but that's okay. Yeah, for sure. Okay, you can have a seat again. So that's one of those foundations. I call that securing the core. Again, the whole idea is to get everything stacked up and tight, right? So that nothing can move, there's no chance of injury in that area. That also brings the other skeletal structure, so you think about your arm and everything else, brings it back into position so that the rest of the muscles have a better opportunity to create more pressure or more force and more strength through that area as we go. Cool, okay, where are we going next? So some of the primal patterns, we're gonna go from here into that nice little server room that you guys have that's really nice and cool and air conditioned, I noticed. Yeah, for sure. So we're gonna head over there and I'll go over these again, but I'm gonna go over a couple of them now. So the primal patterns are things that everybody should be able to do. And they're called primal because when you think back to basically when we became those Homo erectus and we started standing up straight, everybody should be able to move the exact same way because our genetics haven't actually changed that much. So that's why they're called primal patterns. So one of them is called a squat, which you guys have already done a couple times for me today, right? So one of the basic squats is just what I call an air squat. So again, my feet are hip width apart, okay? And I obviously start with my body weight. I'm just gonna let my knees go forward and my bum come down, keep my chest up as best I can. And I'm gonna be coming back up. So that's one of the big keys. You can see how many joints are actually moving as I do that. My knees have to move, my ankles have to move, my hip, and everything else has to kind of maintain alignment as I come up and down. The big key is that I want to try and get my hip to go past my knee as best I can, but if you have knee pain or back pain and it doesn't feel that great, you can just come to here, that's fine too. But the idea is to create that motion of squatting as you go. So that's one of the really big components, okay? The next one we'll go over is called a bend. Okay, some people might know it as a deadlift, I just call it a bend. All you're gonna do is bend at the waist and reach for your toes. Keep your back nice and flat. You can see that as I bend at the waist, my knees will naturally bend as well as I come up and down. But the knees don't necessarily move as much as they were doing the squat. I'm literally just gonna push my bum out, feel the pressure in my hamstrings and my bum, squeeze my bum, and come back up. Remember, my core's always in, my shoulders are always back, and my head's always back as well. Still following me? Perfect. Okay, so those two are really good for building strength through the whole body, because the whole body has to move and has to work together as we move forward, which also means they're really good at burning calories. So if you've ever gone to a group exercise class or anything else, these guys are always in there. Who's been to a group exercise class? Perfect. That's okay, don't worry. Life is gonna change. No, I'm just kidding. Okay, so that's good. The other ones are for the upper body. So we have a push, commonly known as a push-up, where you use your chest muscles and your arm muscles and shoulders muscles to push everything forward. Again, I'm gonna show you some of the equipment in there, but the idea here is that we're gonna stay in line with your sternum, and whatever happens, it's all gonna be happening in the sternum. So if you look at me, I'm not necessarily gonna be pushing at shoulder height, but instead, with my shoulders down and in and everything else nice and tight, I have to push around that sternum level instead, and it allows the muscles to work rather than the joints. Does that make sense? So if I show you a couple push-ups, I come down, my hands are down below my chest, and I come up, my butt's tight, my core's in, my neck's back, and I come up and down as I go. So now if I actually go into a bad position, you can actually see it's not quite as easy for me to do it, and the alignment's totally different versus down and through here. Does that make sense? Perfect. Okay, so that's a push. A pull is the exact opposite. So it's a row or a pull. You can use the rowing machine, you can use weights in that bent over position as you go as well. But the whole idea again is that we're in line with that sternum as we move. So the hands are always in line moving forward or backwards. You can even do both at the same time. If you had maybe a cable or something, you could push with one hand and pull with the other, so then you're actually going the opposite directions. Does that make sense? Cool. Okay, next up. We have overhead pushing, pretty standard. Everything's tight and intact again, and I'm just pushing my arms up and coming back down. The shoulder press, I call it overhead because we're going overhead, right? Yep. Now if you have a bad neck or anything like that, probably not the best idea to do those guys. Sound good? Okay. On the other hand, we now have an overhead pull. So now my resistance would be over my head and I'd be pulling down through here. That's gonna work more of our lats or back muscles in through here, which can be very effective for posture as long as we keep everything nice and tight again. Because if I go into this position, now I'm pulling, it doesn't look very good, right? If I come back and open up, it's a little more effective that way. Sounding good? Perfect. Okay, the last one I've thrown in there is kind of called that a plank. Who's ever done a plank or a front plank before? The cameraman has. Okay, perfect. So a plank is literally that position that I've been holding this whole time that I've been exercising. Now we can actually strengthen that position by holding it and using gravity as our resistance, so we can come down onto our elbows. Yeah, we can make it even easier by lowering our knees. Yeah, we can come into what you call a high plank, where the shoulders are stacked, or the hands are stacked underneath the shoulders. Yeah, you can challenge stability and balance by doing these kinds of things as well. Again, so I'm going to send you an email, right? So these guys will all be in there. There'll also be some other side planks, which would look like this. The whole idea, again, is my shoulders down, my butt's tight, my core's in, so I'm just nice and solid. I can make it easier. I can make it harder. I can make it even harder still. Does that make sense? Yeah, exactly. She's like, wow, this guy's good. So there you go. Moving into the actual resistance, we want to try and keep one exercise per movement. So that's, again, beginner purposes, right? Basic purposes is that we want one chest press, we want one row, we want one overhead press, one pull down. Okay, you could get more specific later on if you want to become a bodybuilder or something like that. It's a totally different story. But today it's all basic stuff. Sound good? Yeah, I just need water. Hold on. Any questions so far?
Yeah, basically the warm-up, you talk about dynamic and static.
Yeah.
What's the difference?
Yeah, for sure. That's a great question. So static stretch would be where I come and just hold it and hang out here. Yeah. When I hang out here for 20 seconds, I can lose up to 20 to 30% of the strength in that muscle. We're trying to strengthen that body. So I've held it probably for 10 seconds, going on to 20 now. I'm now losing strength out of that muscle. That's not good. Whereas if I did maybe something more where I'm actually moving through that whole range as I go, then I'm actually lengthening the tissue, but creating elasticity in it, which elasticity will equal strength in the long run. Does that make sense? Good question, though. I like it, for sure. Yeah, okay. So next up, creating balance within the movements. Basically, it's pretty simple, a 1-to-1 ratio. If I squat once, I then have to bend once. So I work the fronts, and then I work the backs. If I push, I then have to pull as well. So if I do 10 like that, pushing out 10 times, it's got to come back 10 times as well. If you really wanted to work on your posture, you might want to work those back muscles a couple extra times as well. But that kind of gets more specific, right? All general stuff today. Consistency pays off. 2 workouts a week, you'll see some sort of improvement. I see a couple, whoa, 2? You crazy? 1 time a week, you're really not going to get much out of it, right? Think about when you were in university or school and stuff, right? If you only studied 1 time a week, were you really getting better at that course? No, definitely not. But if you read that course every day, or at least got reminded of the subject material, you're going to get better every day, right? Same thing applies to fitness, and same thing applies to the human body. The more you do it, the better you're going to get at it. That being said, you do need time to recover through those times as well, because the muscles need time to recover. So, twice a week is pretty good. 3 times a week is even better. 4 times a week would be amazing, right? You're going to see really good results. And I'm talking about 4 times a week resistance training. So that'd be like literally every other day, every 48 hours. You could go into something called your supercompensation cycle as well. And what that basically means is that if I draw a chart with my finger here, okay, I work out here and my muscles start responding. 24 hours, they're like, oh man, I'm really sore. 48 hours, they're like, okay, I'm ready to go. 72 hours, they start dropping back off and they're not as sore anymore. We want right where they're almost starting to recover, that's when we want to work out again to get that cycle to pump up again. 2 days later, we bump it up again. So we kind of get this nice little hill climb as we go through that chart. Does that make sense? Okay, cool. Okay, consistency. Not just short term, not 1 week. It's got to be week to week, month to month, year to year almost too. If you really want to be healthy and be active and get the benefits out of fitness, I'm here another year, right? So obviously your company is buying into this whole idea, or at least the president is.
It's a good example.
Yeah. Okay, so that kind of brings me to the next point. It's called periodization. So when you periodize something, you take a big idea and you divide it into specific sections, right? So what I've literally done here is create a small program for you guys. We're going to develop your skill, your movement patterns first, so you get really good at the basic things, and then we're going to start challenging the system. So if you look at it, I'm not going to go over all the details, but 1 to 6, you can see that it's pretty low reps, 10 to 12 repetitions. So that's literally 1 push-up would be 1, 2nd push-up would be 2. That's 2 repetitions right there. Okay, 10 to 12, we want to challenge it, but not too bad. We talked about that intensity. For that one, we want things to be about a 5 to 7 out of 10. So if 1 push-up is like a 10 out of 10 to you, probably not the best idea to be doing push-ups. Maybe we need to modify that and use some other weights or resistance instead. Sound good? Yeah. And then as you look down to week 7 to 12, you can see that everything kind of bumps up a notch, whether it's the higher reps, the moderate weight, the sets per exercise, and even the rest. Well, the rest doesn't change for that one, but it does on the next one. So the third week there, the third phase, would be week 13 to 15, everything gets harder in terms of the weights. The reps go lower because you're not going to be able to lift it as many times. Does that make sense? Okay, perfect. Okay. You can see periodization even in like economics and stuff. You'll have macro cycles, mesocycles, and microcycles. And that's exactly what I've done here. It's just taking a big picture, taking a smaller chunk, and then even smaller chunk by virtue of that. Cool. Balancing the yin and the yang. Who's ever heard of yin and yang? Perfect. Where do you guys know it from? Okay. Kung Fu, martial arts. Definitely see it coming in there. Anywhere else? Everybody's seen Kung Fu, martial arts? I know it from yoga personally. My wife is a yoga instructor. I practice yoga pretty regularly as well. The whole idea is that a yang movement or yang workout, if you will, is very aggressive, right? It's that resistance training or sprinting or going to RPM or spinning classes where you're, I'm ready to go. I got to push my limits. Okay, that's good for sure. That's going to get you to a certain point. But at the same time, if we don't let the body rehab and recover and things like that, using that yin aspect, which is that nice, cool, calm, collected, let's go for an easy walk today rather than go for a sprint, or let's maybe do some stretching or yoga instead, then it's going to have a bigger impact overall. You're going to create balance not only in the workout, but potentially in your life as well, because it can really help manage stress levels and stuff too. Does that make sense? I like to even relate that back to the human heart rate. Everybody knows that, the little heart rate, right? So that's a lot of work. That's a little bit of recovery. See how that kind of works? You're like, oh yeah, it kind of makes sense. Yeah, totally does. So there you go. It kind of goes, like I just basically broke it down all for you for sure. I even suggest looking at things at a two-day workout routine. So day 1 is the weights, that yang type workout, and then day 2 would be your recovery. Let's go do some stretching, go for a light walk at lunch with our coworkers, because the guys all love each other, right? Perfect. Okay. I've even gone over some options to increase the intensity of the workouts as well. So if you're like, okay, you know what, I did my push-ups, I took my minute rest, but it wasn't very hard, I need to challenge myself even more, then you can create a different kind of workout. You can do something called a couplet or a superset. So maybe it would be a push-up and a pull, or a push and then a pull. So 10 this way, then 10 this way. Or maybe I'm going to squat for 10 reps as I go, and then I'm going to pick something up for 10 reps as well. Again, we're looking at kind of complementary exercises. So if I do push and then I do a pull, the same number each way, okay? So I've literally said push and pull, or upper body, lower body. So maybe I want to do 10 squats, okay, hit 9 and 10, and then I go down and do 10 push-ups instead. That's actually going to work your heart even harder too, because all that blood had to rush down to the legs. Now it's got to rush back up to the upper body. So now you're getting even more of a cardiovascular workout out of things too. Kind of nice, right? Bang for your buck if you think of it that way. Absolutely. It's like, yeah, I'm doing that tonight. Okay, so the other component I threw in there is called a circuit. Circuits are pretty popular these days in terms of boot camps and things like that. It's taking 3 exercises or more and linking them back to back to back to back. So maybe I want to do my squat, my bend, my push, my pull, my push, my pull, and then plank for 60 seconds. Okay, now I'm dead. But if I take a minute or so to recover, I can actually repeat that workout and get a huge amount of work done in a very short amount of time. So if you're looking to maybe lose weight or burn extra calories and tone up and things like that, circuit training might be the way for you to go. But again, I would suggest that you build your way towards that. Maybe do a couple workouts of the basic stuff and then start linking them together as you go and make it bigger and bigger and bigger. Going back to that macro, meso, microcycle, same idea. Kind of always building a little bit here and there. Okay. How much of that did we retain? Pretty good? Yeah.
When you say, so exercise 4 times a week is good, that's maximum, that would be really good. For how long though?
Now you
That's
can.
like super maximum for me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay,
It's
so.
not gonna happen, but if it happened,
Yeah.
how many, like is it half an hour? Or
Yeah, this type of workout that I'm kind of suggesting here probably would take a half hour to 45 minutes, maximum of an hour if you're being really strict with yourself and taking your time through things. That's something else I didn't write in here that I'm going to add into the version that I send to Erica, as well as your tempo of things. So you want to try and go slow and controlled definitely if we go back to that week 1 to 6 and 7 to 12, slow and controlled is really good. Rushing through things is where you're going to lose your technique and things like that. But when you get to heavier weights, you're going to have no choice but to try and move it quickly, otherwise it's not going to move.
But if you exercise for less than half an hour, is there still some benefit?
Yeah, for sure, absolutely. Canada, yeah, it's not Canada's food guide, but it's Health Canada recently said, I think it's 170 minutes ideally per week total activity, so you can break that up in any way that you want, right? Those numbers are always changing as well. Generally speaking, younger people will be able to handle more exercise, and then you get to it's typically 45 to 55 and over is where you typically see a drop in the actual amount of activity people can withstand. There's some people out there that will condition themselves to go 7 days a week and can go hard most of those days, but they'll probably balance that yin and yang within that day itself. Maybe they go really hard in the morning, then really easy at night kind of thing, right? Or they're getting that yin aspect in at a different time, and they're going through recovery phases like that. If you guys have ever heard of CrossFit, have you guys ever heard of CrossFit before? Quick show of hands. Okay, we got 2 people in here. So their whole idea is 3 days on, 1 day off. So you end up hitting all 7 days, but you have that 1 day of recovery in there. So that's a different way to approach it for sure. But their whole programming is totally different than anything else too. So I'm certified personal trainer, mind body specialist, nutrition wellness specialist, CrossFit level 1 certified, and I have a whole pile of knowledge in my head. So I understand everything, but we're just talking basic stuff today.
Great.
Yeah, for sure. That was a good question though. I like it. It's one that a lot of people don't think about too. So it's good. Yeah. Any other questions? Yeah.
When you get to week 18.
Pardon me? When you get to week 18?
Week 18, then what? Back to
Oh, you can send me an email and come on over.
You'd be a personal trainer then.
Yeah. No, but for all intents and purposes, you could hypothetically repeat the cycle again, right? Give yourself that chance to rest a little bit. Remember, balancing everything. We just went hard for basically 2 straight phases or 12 weeks there, right? So then if you took that little bit of a rest, we go back down to like that 50 to 60, 70% intensity, and then we start building back up, then we're creating another peak, right? Just like that heart rate as we go. Or hill climbing, if you've ever thought. Who's ever sat on a bike or a treadmill and you've noticed these little graphs on the corners? You guys know what I'm talking about? Yeah, they have these little funny little diagrams and stuff on it. It's a hill climb or intervals built into that. And we're essentially intervaling over the course of 18 weeks total, right? So, and then you can repeat that and create that, and that becomes then your total calendar year if you want to. That's when I sit down with a new prospective client, that's exactly what I've done, is talk to them about their goals and everything else, and then I actually plan out an entire year, depending on their goal. If they want to lose 100 pounds, it's probably going to take longer than a year, right? So I actually might even look at 1.5 years to 2 years, and then I'm going to be creating this giant interval over the course of that huge section of time, breaking it down section by section as we go, specifically to their needs, goals, injuries, that kind of stuff, right? So, yeah. Any other good questions? I like these questions.
I was joking with Lynn about not being the maximum 4, but
yeah.
You know, like myself, I try to bike as much as I can. It's an hour each way.
Yep.
That's going at like 30 kilometers an hour.
Yep.
But then on Saturday, I'll swim.
Yep.
And Sunday, I'll go for a long run.
Yep.
So it's not really a day off, but it's a day off of biking, so I'm sort of cross-training.
Yeah, you're cross-training, and the other thing too, right, is biking is kind of like an intermediate impact on the body because you're going to withstand bumps and things, and it does take a little bit of wear and tear on the hips and knees and things as you're going. And I'm guessing you're on a road bike, right, at that kind of mileage, so you're in that crouch position. Whereas then, when you're swimming, it's way lower impact, and it's a different stimulus for the body. And so we've just kind of had 2 different stimuluses, and then your running is going to be a higher impact on the body too. So your swimming, I would even probably. You obviously use that as a form of transportation to get here, but I would automatically suggest maybe dropping a bike and add in another swim, so you almost get a little bit more of the rehab benefit and full body work instead of so much lower body and core work out of the bike. But you can't swim to work very easily, so no. So
Take the canal.
yeah, you can take the canal, yeah, maybe hook up, counteract the current. That would be really good resistance, eh? Yeah, for sure. Okay, any other good questions? No, not so much. Cameraman, no questions? You're good to go? Okay, so what I want to do then is we'll go over into your awesome workout area. We'll go over some of those primal patterns. I'll show you different ways so that you can look at things. I've already shown you a couple just within here, but we'll go over there and I'll show you how to do it with the weights as well. Sound good? Okay. Okay, so we've got a couple of different pieces of equipment. Obviously, Some of us probably know the equipment better than others, and that's okay. I'm not here to judge it by any means, okay? This is your classic bench press. So we talked about that push pattern, right? I use that push up as the example. That's one of the big keys. Remember with that one, with that push pattern, we always want things in line with your sternum as you're pushing. That's going to take all the pressure away from the shoulders and put it into the skeletal system as we go, in the muscular system. Sound good? I'm not going to necessarily go and do it just because there's a camera there, and that's okay. Okay, perfect. Hopefully it's not too much weight and I'm going to die here. Nope, I think I'll be okay. So when we lay down with this one, this is a classic that you're going to see in pretty much every single gym in the world. It's always there. When you lay down, watch your head. That's the foremost thing. Okay, the other big component is that we want your head to be below, because we're going to have the arms moving as we go through here. So when we go to set up your grip, you want to think about where are my arms actually be moving, because I don't want to set up way in here and then have to try and adjust as we go. Does that make sense? Okay, so we start outside. My butt goes tight, my belly button comes in, my shoulders go down. Okay, I go to breathe out, push the weight up, bring it up and over my chest, and then it's coming down and push back up. Sound good? Okay. You got some wicked, awesome stuff here. Okay. Next up, we'll go over what I call a goblet squat. So the air squat, remember, is just using your own body weight where I'm coming up and down. Now when you get to the point where you're like, okay, I'm not really feeling this that much, and you want to start adding some other external resistance, this is where I would go to. So with the goblet squat, we want to have it nice and tight to the body. Again, my feet are that hip width or just beyond hip width stance. My butt goes tight, my belly button's in, my shoulders come back. Everything's nice and secure. And I'm going to sink down and then come back up as I go. Sound good? Yeah. Hips go past the knees and then I stand back up. Now if we then go into our bend or that deadlift, my shoulders come back, my feet are that same stance. I'm just going to shove my bum out behind me, come down, feel the stretch of my hamstrings, and squeeze my bum to come back up. If you can't go that far, that's okay. You only have to come to here. That's fine too. You go as far as your body allows you to that day. Sounding good? Okay. What else can I show you around here? So I just deadlifted. I don't know if anybody saw that. I bent. See that? See? Now the deadlift is one of the most practical exercises in the world. You're always going to use it, whether you pick up your kids or the groceries off the ground, right? We're going to do a row in that bent over position. So I'm going to hold that deadlift with my bum tight, my belly button in, my shoulders back. Grab a hold of the weight. I'm going to pull towards my chest and then come back down as I go. Does that make sense? The whole idea there is that I'm using my shoulders to create that movement as I come back. So if I'm moving and then I'm pulling as I go. That's your pull, okay? It is hot in here.
That's the workout.
That is the workout, just moving around. Who was working out earlier today? You're strong, whoever it was. That, all the eyes turned to one guy. So we'll go over a pull down. So remember we talked about overhead pulling, so coming down this way. With this machine, it looks as though I want to be sitting away from the machine. And the handle is up through here, so I'm going to have to push it up, come down. Remember, my butt goes tight. Even though I'm seated, I still want everything nice and stacked. So my core's in, my butt's tight. I'm going to breathe out, pull down towards my chest, and then come back up as I go. Well, not as well used. That's okay. The whole idea here, again, is just to create that movement and come back down as I go. It's really easy for that one to get your shoulders caught up. Remember, we want those shoulders down before we start moving and coming down. Yes?
That one, if you have a sore neck or back, is that dangerous or is that okay?
As long as you keep everything in tight and the shoulders down, you should be okay. I would obviously start light and then build your way up as you can. Yeah, it's going to help strengthen all the muscles through here that actually keep all the pressure away from your neck. Like for example, I actually have a neck issue from sleeping funny on the weekend on a bad hotel bed. We'll leave that be, but that's okay. So one of the big exercises that I actually have to do to keep the pressure away is that actual exercise itself, that lat pull down or the overhead pull down itself.
So someone who doesn't exercise regularly,
Yeah. Cool. I would probably start at the bare minimum until you're comfortable with the movement. So it's got 10 pounds or a 10. I'm guessing it's pounds because that felt like 50 pounds. So yeah. That's one thing you're going to notice too. It looks like everything in here is in pounds, but it could also be marked in kilograms. So if you put on 40 and it's ultra heavy, it's probably 40 kilograms, which is a lot different than 40 pounds.
That's all in pounds.
It's all in pounds? Okay. So one of the other things we talked about was the overhead press. So that was one option to come down, right? The overhead pull. The overhead press, again, everything's nice and tight. I like to do this one standing because you're going to burn more calories standing. So I'm going to push up and come back down as I go. One of the big issues that you often see is this movement instead. We want to keep those guys down to let the shoulders do the work rather than those neck muscles. If you don't feel comfortable, you do have a bad back, then you can always do it seated as well. And you can push up again. My core is in, my butt's tight, and my shoulders are back as well. Sounding good? Okay, perfect. So that's pretty much all the big stuff. This one looks like a leg press. So that would be like that squatting motion, but just pushing your legs out. Now the only reason I don't like those kinds of machines is that you don't get what you call full extension out of the hip, because you're going to be bent there just doing this. Okay, unless you're riding your bike all the time, that it's not going to be overly beneficial. But even still, if you're riding your bike all the time, I'd rather see more extension because you're not getting that all the time on the bike. I'd rather get all that butt muscle working as much as we can. That's why I default to more of that squat as we come up and through. This is a fly. It's another option for your press. So instead of using a bench press, you could use a fly, but I know we all sit here at desks and computers, so I probably wouldn't do so much of that movement because that's exactly what we already sit there and do. Instead, I would do stuff that's more functional, not so much one joint. I'd want more than one joint working. Does that make sense? Yeah.
Just turn those little dials. If you can explain that, you can actually do that press.
This guy?
Yeah, so just turn them out,
Okay.
and then you can actually use that
Oh,
as
then
a
it
press.
turns into a press. Ah, there you go. So then you would just sit down and push out. Oh yeah, that makes sense. Yep, for sure. So that's a pretty cool idea. I've never seen that before. Okay. The attachment down here is for what you call a leg extension, and you come up and down through here. Again, I like more of that functional idea where I'm using more of my body going through range of the motion. So I tend to typically stay away from these things. It can also be very hard on the knees as well. So yeah, again, if we were talking about maybe correcting certain issues, that will actually work more of your vastus medialis, your inner quad muscle. Whereas when you do a squat, using more of the outside stuff. But that's again why we go back to talking about getting your hips past your knees to actually activate more of that muscle. So if you watch my legs, and I'm coming up and down, you can see that this muscle out here likes to work a lot. If I come down nice and deep, you can see that guy actually pop up and have to work to help me get back up. So that's the whole idea of getting that full range through that area as we go. Yep.
If someone has a back issue,
Yep.
that might be better than all that bending. But it's not.
Yes and no, because you can limit how much is moving, right, by how deep you're going into things. And as you get more used and more flexible and things like that, used to the exercise, then you'll actually be able to get deeper and deeper into the exercise as well. If you really do have a bad back, I would also suggest doing maybe a couple extra planks and things like that than I've suggested on the outline there, just because that's going to help strengthen everything up as well. So yeah, it's pretty funny because there's a lot of people that say, you know, if I have a really sore back, if I have this, I have that, maybe I just shouldn't do it. Well, anything's going to be better than nothing, typically speaking, right? Again, if you're really concerned, then that might be where you have to go into one-on-one attention to get more specific guidelines on things too. So just kind of, I'm just being honest with you guys. Yeah, for sure. The other stuff in here, like there's like an ab crunch in the back corner. Again, it's not very functional. I don't typically walk around doing this kind of stuff, right? I actually like to walk around with my spine stacked on top of itself. That's why I condition people to do more of the planking based stuff, typically speaking. If we're looking to get a six-pack and you want to go to the beach, then it might make sense to do that kind of stuff. But at the same time, not a whole lot of people actually looking to do that. They just want their bodies to work better. So, yeah. Does that make sense to everybody? Anybody have any questions? No? Okay. Who wants to get out of the hot and stinky room? Yeah, so I'll go over now that it's a little quieter and you guys can, I don't have to scream. one of the big things we talked about is that pull down, right? And you were really worried about that, so I'll revisit it again. The whole idea, again, is to make sure everything's open and you have those shoulders down and open. And what I mean by open is that the chest opens up, literally. You want to have good solid posture like you were talking about, keeping it all intact. So as soon as we go back to that position, that's when you're actually going to start using these muscles. And actually, you can see them work too. If I do this, good technique, you can see that they stay down, right? And they're not contract, they don't flare up, right? Whereas if I start doing this, you can actually see that they pop out, and that's where you're going to get those strains and everything coming up and through here. So yeah, like I talked about too, since you all typically, I think you're all desk workers, correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, we are.
Okay, so then one of the big things too is that you could even eliminate maybe one of those days a week of doing the chest press motion or that push, and you can just focus on your pulls instead to help create better alignment through everything as well. Because we're also anteriorly or forward dominant with your fingers, your thumbs, your mouses, and everything else, doesn't really matter what you're doing. Everything's always in this position. That's how we interact, it seems like, with each other sometimes too. That's okay, but ultimately, this is the way that our body was actually designed. It's called anatomical adaptation. There's a super famous, I think it was, who was it, Leonardo da Vinci, I think, did that drawing, and the guy's basically saying here like this, right? That's because that's the way that our skeletal structure is designed to sit like this. Our tongue is also supposed to be pushed to the top of our mouth, but yeah. That's okay. You're like, really? It's like, yeah, totally, it's crazy. Because when that happens, when you depress your tongue up to the top, it turns on everything through the neck and through the upper abdominals as well. So if you're doing crunches, try pushing your tongue up to the top, and you'll notice that you just lifted 8% of your body weight more as you do that crunch. Yeah.
And you don't talk as much.
And you don't. Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. One thing that I didn't go over, it's on here, but I definitely should go over it, is the breathing aspects of things. So the general rule of thumb is that when the weight is moving, or you're trying to move the weight and you're exerting force to move the weight, is when you breathe out. Why? Because it's going to actually contract part of your abdominals, your diaphragm, to help push the air out, and it creates stability through the core. So if I go into a push-up again, and I hold my breath, you can see what I get, 3 or 4 reps there maybe? Yeah, because I had no oxygen actually moving to the body. And I could probably also see my back was starting to sag because there's no actual stability through my core. Whereas if I go and do a couple more push-ups, and I breathe, I can do those all day long because my heart's actually cycling and giving my muscles what they need, oxygen, which is energy. Does that make sense? Yeah, so whether you're lifting something from here, or you're squatting, or you're pulling, you gotta be breathing to create stability. There's if you go and do research on it, other people will say hold your breath while doing exercise, but that's usually under extreme amounts of weight and you're doing something called Olympic lifting, which is in the Olympics, and they are at a totally different level than most people. So breathe out and push, or breathe out and move the weight. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Cool. It all relies back on posture. Ultimately, that's what it comes down to. So there you go. Those are the basics. I could sit here and talk all day.
That's a great comment.
Yeah, thank you. Any other questions? I'm going to send out flexibility-based stuff. I'm going to send out the core stuff. And then I'll email this with that one adding of tempo in there that I forgot this morning.
Wonderful.
There should be probably 4 or 5 things in that email today. Well, like I have nothing to do until 4 o'clock, so there's no excuse for me at this point. Yeah. Okay.
Good.
Thanks for having me.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
Oh yeah, for sure.